everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Meeting the Author for Rising Relentlessly. Super excited to have Ashley Elizabeth today. She's the editor, she does marketing, she does all of the wonderful social media posts you all see. She does it all for Wildly Free. And so this conversation is going to be a little bit different, free flowing, and kind of just digging into why she decided to be an author in the second book. And so, with that, Ashley Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for that great intro, Rochelle. I'm Ashley Elizabeth, and like she said, I am all in on this thing wildly free that we're doing here. This is such a passion for me in so many ways. I love being in spaces where authors get empowered, and I love empowering them at all ages because I actually also have the background of being a teacher. So I've been an educator for 17 years, and I still work with my middle schoolers, whom I love. And all of that has really given me a solid foundation for not only participating in this wildly free world and also giving me a lot of stories to pull from when we're talking about being in some different books, because being in this book, it was a lot focused more on the education side of things for me. So thanks for having me here, Michelle.
I'm so excited to dive in because I actually I've had the privilege of reading your chapter for a week now. I think I read it about a week ago, and it really does touch on, so many things, all the spaces that you've been in. But I think that
Mm.
there's kind of a special tell to why did you choose to be in the second book? You started off becoming a best-selling author for Rooted to Rise. That was such an organic experience, process, all the things.
Hmm.
And, we went into writing the second book, and originally you were not going to be an author in this book. And,
No.
you were going to just show up on all the other beautiful spaces that you always do consistently. But then something happened, and you have to go into great detail because I know you do in your chapter, but what made you say yes to sharing another story in this book?
Yeah, it's so interesting how life does things for us in
Mhm.
a lot of ways. And when I said yes to being in Rooted to Rise, it was really hard for me. It felt like I knew it was going to be a vulnerable journey. I knew that I was going to put a lot of things out there, a lot of things that a lot of people didn't know about me were going to make it into the pages of that book. And so it took a lot of I don't know, it took a lot of courage to say yes, but I knew there was a tug on me to be in that space. And we did it and we walked through it. But during that time, I had a lot of really hard things happen in my life. I remember that when Rooted to Rise launched, I was in the hospital with my dad. And then everything last year with like losing my dad when we were stepping into Rising Relentlessly, in my head, it was like, okay, you've got a lot going on. It's been a heavy year. You were in the last book. You don't necessarily need to be in this one. Be an editor, be in the marketing, be in the space. But do you really have something different to share? Because you poured a lot out in the first one. So that was kind of the story that I had going on in my head. Well, fast forward, we have had so many beautiful conversations with authors, like so many beautiful conversations with authors that came in knowing they wanted to work with us, authors that came in not having any clue where they were going to start and what their journey was going to look like, and really everything in between. And when we started having these conversations with authors, I was realizing that some of the things that they were talking about continued to, I don't know, tug at me, resonate within me. And there was one conversation in particular, like you said, people can read more about it in the chapter, but essentially it was a conversation that inspired me in so many different ways and also made me angry because I watched essentially someone's voice get stolen. Somebody choose not to step into their voice because of the voices of others. And then I really got to thinking about it, and I was angry like for them, but I also realized that a lot of the anger came from inside me about my own story and my own walk, that my reaction there was because I knew that I was still holding back, that there were still voices in my head, in my space, that were saying it would be better if you were a little quieter. It would be better if you weren't stepping out in this because that feels risky and risky on a different level than what it was like for you in the first book. And then just the more that I sat in that space and the angrier I got about all of it, I was like, well, gosh, now I can't not write in this book because I'm like, this is another story that I need to tell because I know there are other people out there that are in a space like I was. And also, I needed to do it for me. I needed to make sure that I was stepping out again with this other part of my story that belonged in this book and belonged in this space. So it's kind of a journey.
I love that on so many different levels because I think that there's so many mirrors that are held up for us in life. And I got to witness the whole thing. So not to steal anything from your personal experience, but I got to watch the start to finish that and getting to read the chapter. And I really just feel like it added more power to what we're doing with Wildly Free. And that it was just another example of this is why we're showing up, even when it's hard, even when we're all doing multiple things. You showed up for yourself and you showed up to give that individual a voice, even though they'll never know it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I love that. And so with that, I know that there weren't like really any fears or hesitations in terms of you had already written before, but were there any fears or hesitations about what you were going to write about? And were there any surprises in the writing process because you went from no, it's okay, because you had such a tragic 2025. What surprised you about all of the things that came together to have you say yes to yes, I need to write about this? Because it's not just about the
Hmm.
situation that happened, it's so much more.
So much more than that. That just happened to be something that crystallized a lot of things in my brain. And, it's funny as both an author and an editor, the spaces that we occupy. And like you mentioned, I do a lot of things marketing wise for us. And I pour so much of me into those spaces that another I don't know, I suppose I would call it a hesitation for me was just knowing the creative space that I was in, the creative energy that I was in was very much focused on Wildly Free and not so much on myself until that moment. And then when I was turning that mirror and I was looking in at myself, I was really surprised. The writing and Rooted to Rise, I put off writing my chapter until the last possible second. It was due on like May 31st or something like that, and it was May 30th that I was sitting there and I was like, you know, typing it all out, and it was a Friday, and I remember hitting send to you and being like, I don't even know what just I was in like an alternate dimension, pouring that out, and I never went back and reread it, and I never did. I just sent it, and I was like, I got to get this in the publisher's hands. This time around, as soon as I made the decision, I had so many things that I was feeling that my first initial draft of it just poured out of me. I would say that it just like bled out on the page and what I experienced at first because when people read my chapter, they're going to notice that that story that we're talking about is not the very first thing you read. The very first thing you read was me talking about my voice and the struggle to say yes and Rooted to Rise. And then the struggle, kind of what I was realizing in that process. And it was interesting to me that that's what poured out first. Again, it was all about this internal battle that I had going on within me that was like, are you going to say no to your voice again? Did you not learn? Did you not learn from Rooted to Rise what you were supposed to learn? Fine, we're going to give you another lesson in this. And so, stepping into that first draft, it flowed really, really smoothly. And when I finished it, I knew I wasn't done with it. But then I started editing other people's chapters because that was a space that I needed to step into. And it surprised me that when I shifted into that space, there was a part of me that clicked off my own personal creative part of me that was in my chapter because then my brain and my heart were entirely focused on them. And I didn't hold those two things simultaneously. It was like I needed to spend all of my time and my energy in those creative spaces editing for other people and not in ways that I wouldn't say they influenced my story, it was like there was, I would say, a barrier of sorts, where it's like this is the editing version of me. And I was all in, and having that experience to preserve their voices, uh, I just have continued to grow more and more passionate about what it is we do here. I couldn't get back around to mine though until after theirs were all in. And so I was one of the ones that missed the deadline for my chapter because I was so in on the rest of our authors all the way through the finish line that that had to happen for me before I could go back. And so to answer your original question, things that I was kind of, I don't know, I suppose battling internally, I don't think I would say fear, so to speak,
Mm.
but the first draft of the chapter was was very raw, and I knew there was more depth that was coming, but it stayed a little bit more surface level until I'd gone through everything else. And by the time I got to that second draft of it, the things that I was changing and the things that I was adding, I could tell that the rest of those barriers had been stripped away, because I think that showing up over and over and watching people say yes to their voice, even though it was somebody who said no that originally inspired this, I think their yeses gave me additional courage that I needed to go deeper with my own story. And so that was surprising to me because my writing process is very unique to me. Um, but it was interesting how chunked and separate it was for me this time around.
Do you think there was a lesson that you learned about how you were able to table your voice while supporting others' voices?
Hmm.
And how that, I don't know, that just kind of came to the surface. We can dig into
Yeah.
that another day, but was there was there something that just kind of like came up to me? It's
Yeah.
really telling in like what you're trying to do for others, that maybe
Mm.
there's like some opportunities for yourself. So you're learning side by side. It's like parallel, like
It is very much.
opportunity catching. So just thought I'd
But
point that out.
I think that's what writing does for us, right? Like when I think about my passion for what we do at Wildly Free, it's because when we take time and we give voice to these stories that are inside of us, having that play parallel to the whatever else is happening in our lives, whether it's continuing to edit, whether it's still grieving the loss of, somebody close to you, whether it's balancing a job and also this other thing that you're doing. Like I I feel like in all of it, I think there's probably, yes, still more for me to learn in that space, but I also feel like I got a chance to say yes to me over and over, because even saying yes to me as an editor is pulling out more and more from me because of the bravery and the voices of these authors that keep saying yes.
Hmm.
Like I can't get enough of it. I just can't. And then when I write alongside of it, like you said, my mirrors get clearer.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was a great question.
Unscripted. I think that one of the things that just kind of, needs to be pointed out is that sometimes people get scared to
Mm.
connect with us, maybe let's just say as a whole, because they think we're so far ahead of them,
Oh.
that we're just so like more experienced. We were born to do this. And I think that this, it's hard to just talk about you as an editor because you're just
Hmm.
so much more in these spaces. One of the things that I feel we need to chat about for a minute is that we're like maybe 5 steps
Hmm.
and that we're bringing them along with us. But we're really, I mean, we didn't go into this knowing how to do it. We've made a lot of like opportunities for ourselves and all of that. And so, what would you tell someone who wants to tell their story, who wants to be in an anthology, maybe because that's maybe the next step instead of just like writing their own book as a whole? But
Yeah.
because of that awareness, what would you tell someone? That might have some of those, oh, but they're better than me or they're more experienced than me or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel on that subject?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that just in general anyway, because I think that so much of what holds us back, and I would say it was something that held me back, not even in the writing world, right? But it's when we look at ourselves in the mirror on paper, whatever, and we're judging ourselves against an imaginary someone else.
Hmm.
Because whatever we think we know about other people, we don't. We don't, right? We know what we experience in, person. We know what we experience online, but we don't know what their experience is inside. And we know that we know that we know that comparison is the thief of joy, right? But it steals a lot of other things too. And I feel like when we talk to people, I think in their head, they are always battling some, I, I don't know, some other voice that's in there. So many of our authors are battling old educator voices, which breaks my heart, right? Educators that for whatever reason, in whatever time, in whatever space they were occupying, said, your words are not enough, your skill is not enough. And that is terrifying to then turn around and say, but I have a story that needs to be told, and I'm going to have to put my words on paper to do so. Right? That is a terrifying place to be. I also think there are people who are like, well, does anybody really need my story? Aren't there other stories out there about stressed out teachers? Aren't there other stories out there about somebody who received a kidney transplant? Aren't there other stories out there about fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank? And the answer is that nobody on this planet can tell your story like you can. And nobody gets the right to tell you that your words either do or don't belong anywhere. That's an inner calling. That's an inner tug. You know when you want to show up in that space. And so I feel like when we talk to people and they're like, "Oh gosh, I wonder if these people are so far ahead of me." The answer is we're not. What happened is we chose courage and we chose to step out in it. And the reason that we are Wildly Free is such a heart-centered space is because it is our hearts that are leading us forward. It is this passion for what we continue to see being pulled from others and spilt onto pages that then blow our minds and blow their minds. And we send it to advanced readers and we send it to other people, and people are like, oh my goodness, I didn't know. I didn't know this person's story. I didn't know a book could sound or feel like this. I didn't realize I needed fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank, all of these things that would have kept someone silent. And so I would say that if somebody's on the edge and they're like, I think I want to be in an anthology, or I think I want to write an anthology, or I think I want to be the curator of an anthology, I would tell you that there is no better place than right here, because it doesn't matter how many steps ahead you think we are. What we're going to do is grow with you. And I don't know that there is a safer place to be than that. I just don't know that there is. And I can also tell you unequivocally that I would encourage them not to walk this journey alone, because there are so many options out there, and I would never try and steer somebody away necessarily from those. Like, there's so many benefits to traditional publishing. There are so many benefits to self-publishing, and also know yourself. And also, I'm telling you that there is literally nothing like walking a journey like that in community, real community. I'm not talking about other communities that are in online spaces where there are ulterior motives that govern a lot of those spaces. I'm talking about real people who sit down and have real conversations, real editors who read real words that don't need to be perfect on the first time around. That's what you get here at Wildly Free. That's why we end up with authors who leave feeling so incredibly empowered and never feeling like, well, maybe they did at some points, their own self-doubt, but hopefully never feeling like there was a space in this journey with any one of us where they didn't feel like they were enough.
Hmm.
Because that, I don't know, that would crush all of us.
Well, that's
But
actually consistently coming through in every single
mm,
podcast so far is just the amount of support, which leads me into the fact that you've done this twice now.
hmm
So, with that, what for you personally did that do for you to be in community, not only
hmm
as the editor and all the other things, but what did that do for you as an individual and a part of the
hmm
collective?
yeah. Um, Momentum is something that I deeply understand on a lot of levels. I used to be a coach. I understand it on a coaching level. I understand it in classrooms. I understand it in business spaces, but I really, really deeply understand it in personal spaces.
Mhm.
And I think so much of what keeps people stuck and prevents them from growing is when they believe the lie that they were supposed to do it alone. That somehow this is like because it's internal work, it's solitary work, and that's false. All the best internal work that we do, even though it is our responsibility, we have to step into those spaces. It is better when done in community. It's better when it's done in community. And for me, in the first book, saying yes, showing up in a space where I needed to use my voice, even in small ways, on our gatherings, when we would all get together, when everybody started sharing, I think this is what my chapter is going to be about. I mean, I remember that in Rooted to Rise. I remember sitting there thinking, like, oh my gosh, that's your story. That's an incredible story. Like, I want to read it right now. Right? Where's your chapter now? And hearing everybody's, and also when I shared what mine was and their reactions to mine. It was so validating. It was so encouraging, right? And then you form these bonds with the people who are in there because you're walking this journey together and somehow you're going to end up making it to the other side and you realize like you had linked arms all the way through it from start to finish. It's a different level. It's a different level of being able to say, like, I walked through this with you. I saw you struggle, you saw me struggle, and then we crossed the finish line together. I knew you had doubts, I had doubts. We crossed the finish line together. And now being on the other side of it, I mean, when Rooted to Rise launched, like we had no idea what was coming, and then we hit number one in our categories on Amazon, like, just within hours of what was happening. And it's because of collective momentum. The stories were deeper because of collective momentum. The things that we experienced. When I said yes to being in Rising Relentlessly, I knew what I was saying yes to that time, being in community. And it was incredible to watch all the other authors start to feel the yes when we were gathering. I'll never forget in Rising Relentlessly, those first calls where people started sharing their chapters. I mean, tears streaming down people's faces as they're just listening to people talk about. These are not polished scripts.
Mm-mm.
These are not, you didn't say, hey, before you come to the gathering, make sure you have something prepped and ready to share. No, it was like, this is what's happening. What do you think you're going to put in your chapter? No commitment, no judgment, but real raw reactions from the people who are standing next to you, right? And there's just the bonds that you forge in those spaces, it creates momentum. And then that momentum shows up in people's chapters. It shows up in the social spaces when it's time to start marketing things, right? And I even feel like using the word marketing when it comes to wildly free things, I don't know, I wish there was a new word for it
We'll
because
come up with
marketing
one.
sound we probably will. I just marketing sounds like, oh, okay, what's going to be the right, gimmick or trick or whatever that's going to get that. And we don't have to work at that. We tell our authors like show up authentically because we know that that momentum has already been built and it is just like watching a sunrise. You just start seeing these bits of light showing up in different places and then they hear each other and they see the reactions and these other things and then it's more and more and more and more and then it's just this explosive powerful addictive energy that ends up out there and you watch people continue to step into that energy and it's incredible. It's
I think
incredible.
it's like a layered invitation.
Oh, I like that.
And
Yeah.
with that, I will express that when I was reading your chapter, it felt like a seven-layer dip. And I'm going to break this up for a reason because, I know I told you this after I read it, but it was like I grabbed a chip and I dipped it, and it was like, what am I going to get? Am I going to get the beans and the guacamole? Am I going to get the cheese? Am I going to get the, whatever you put in your seven-layer dip? But that's what it felt like. And so that was like my takeaway on so many other levels without giving away anything. But what do you hope others will take away from your chapter?
hmm I would say that my biggest hope for a takeaway is that people both acknowledge the unwritten rules that keep us quiet and keep us stuck, right? Because seeing them is a really important first step. Whatever they choose to do with that, seeing them is really important. And then second would be understanding that we have choices beyond what those rules tell us, beyond what the social constructs tell us, beyond what all of those things do in our lives. And it's not because any of those things, or I should say most of those things, are not, they're not intentionally limiting. They come with a lie that this thing is keeping you safe, right? But in reality, it's keeping you stuck. And so, even though this chapter is for educators everywhere, and I want educators to feel seen, I want them to feel empowered, I want them to laugh in ways that, makes them feel like, oh my gosh, has she been in my classroom? Has she been in my, whatever. I want them to feel seen, but I also want them to feel like there are other options for me out there. I have choices. And if I don't know, I think there's so many people out there that are raging in the educational world where the end result is leave teaching. And I don't think that's the only option either. And I think so many people think that that's the only thing that's available to them. When in reality, there are ways to look at the unwritten rules and ways to step into keeping ourselves healthier, more grounded, um, just more balanced in ways that we just don't know. And so kind of in all of that, I want people to be able to acknowledge unwritten rules, and then I want them to be able to know that there are other options that are available to them. Whether they choose to follow the CBD journey or not, there are other options that are out there. And so that's what I'm hoping people take away.
I love that so much. So we touched on all of the parts of, becoming an author, why you said yes again, all of the things. And what I love to kind of end these conversations with is taking someone back to a time where maybe they started writing their story about
Mm.
in this book. But for you in particular, it just kind of came to my mind. What would you tell Ashley Elizabeth in November of 2023 when I
Oh
got
my
on that
gosh.
call and I said, "Hey, I'm going to write a book and I'm giving you an open invitation. We'll have a gathering in February," because I knew that I needed to give some space for that. What would you tell Ashley Elizabeth today that you know now that maybe she didn't know then?
First of all, I'd give her a really big hug because she has no idea what's coming. And I would also, I know you always talk about people crying at the end of these, so it's real. Um, but I would tell her, you have no idea how much you need this. Like you think you're doing this just to share your story. I mean, like I said, the tug was hard. I knew I wanted to be in it, but I don't think I realized how much I needed that book and that experience. Um, I didn't know how much I needed to write those things down. I didn't know how much I needed, the feedback that I was going to get from people. I didn't know how much it was going to impact me when I had people telling me, like, I read your story and I realized that, the things that I deal with are similar. And I want to know more about what it is that you're doing and how you're, managing all of these things. I don't know. There were so many, you talk about layers. There were so many layers. Saying yes to a book. Well, I can't say that I know what it's like in any other space. I only know what it's like in this space. But saying yes to a book in this space is saying yes to every level of you. And people, I think, put so many barriers up because, again, I think they think it's protecting them. And I would just tell them that it's so much more than a book. It's so much more than a chapter. And you just have no idea how much you need it until you're in it and you're living it. And so I would tell November 2023, Ashley Elizabeth, like, buckle up because this is going to change your life in every single way that you absolutely need.
Well, I'm completely honored, first and foremost, to walk every single second of it out with you. Not only from creating books and giving people safe spaces to leave their legacy stories and creating spaces where youth get to feel safe
Mm.
to be themselves, not, like there's no competition. I think that kaleidoscope space is, my girls are loving it personally. But what we're building together from a group of share your transformational truths, which that book is coming out this year. Our first one to let's create something that just doesn't exist out there. And it literally takes the hearts of all five of us, the team of Wildly Free, and then the ones that are up and coming and learning the ways of the world that are joining us. that's what makes us special because
Mm,
we put, so much into perspective for people. We answer the questions in a very safe way. And
mm,
I just think that, it's just a testament to leaning into opportunities where it's never been comfortable. But when you get to do it with someone else, that it just turns
mhm.
into something more beautiful than you could ever imagine. So I am greatly honored, and I thank you from the top and the bottom of my heart for saying yes to yourself and all of the things that you've brought to this. Hey, let's try this out space. And it's growing faster and bigger than we ever imagined,
Mm,
sometimes faster than our capacity even allows us, but just learning how to be human in all of it. And with
mm.
that, I want to say thank you for spending time with me and sharing your heart again in this beautiful space where we get to say thank you, everyone, for listening to Ashley Elizabeth pour her heart and her soul as she does with everything else. And we will provide for you all of the ways you can connect with her. The easiest way is just simply through Wildly Free. She gets all of the social media messages and everything, but we will be adding that to this podcast. But thank you so much for everyone who's listening. And if you have any questions or if you just want to sit in space with us, there's another invitation. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. We actually prefer messy. We know how to deal with messy. We don't know how to deal with perfection. So, with all of that being
Perfection
said,
doesn't
it
exist.
doesn't exist. So, thank you, everyone. And until next time for the next episode, thank you.